What if the reflection staring back at you was not really yours? Tonight, we uncover the chilling tale of Jonah, a man who followed a lantern's glow into the mist, and came face to face with a creature that should not exist. A toad with golden eyes. A pond that was more than just water. And a reflection that refused to stay in the mirror. Stay with me, because once you hear what Jonah saw next, you will never look at your reflection the same way again. The night was heavy with silence. A thick mist curled over the ground, glowing faintly under the pale moonlight. Tall pines leaned close together, their branches whispering in the still air. Jonah walked slowly along the narrow path, his lantern trembling in his hand. The scent of wet soil rose with every cautious step. Somewhere in the distance, a single owl gave a long, hollow cry. Then, from the edge of a shallow pond, he heard it. A croak. Low. Drawn out. Almost like a voice, stretched too far to be natural. His chest tightened as he moved closer, eyes straining to pierce the fog. The pond rippled, though no wind touched its surface. A shape emerged, squat and gleaming with moisture. A toad. But larger than any Jonah had ever seen. Its skin shimmered with strange patterns, shifting as though alive. Its eyes glowed faintly, golden and unblinking, fixed directly on him. The air grew damp, heavy, pressing against his lungs. Jonah's hand shook so violently that the lantern rattled, glass knocking against its frame. The toad let out another croak, deeper, almost human in tone. And then, its mouth stretched. Wider. And wider. Far beyond what should be possible. Inside was not the dark cavern of a throat, but a swirling void of light and shadow. A rushing sound filled the air, like waves crashing against unseen rocks. Jonah felt the ground tilt beneath him, pulling him closer to that impossible mouth. His legs stiffened, frozen in place. The lantern slipped from his grip, tumbling into the pond with a hiss. Darkness swallowed the clearing, except for the glow from the creature's eyes. The sound grew louder, filling his skull, vibrating in his bones. And then, with a sudden snap of silence, the toad spoke. The toad's voice did not sound like speech. It was layered, echoing, as if many voices spoke together from deep inside a cavern. Jonah's skin prickled. Every hair along his arms and neck stood on end. The voice pressed against his skull, heavy and undeniable. You stepped where you were not invited. Jonah's lips parted, but no sound came out. His throat locked tight, as if invisible hands gripped it. The mist thickened, swirling around him, wrapping his body in a cold embrace. The forest seemed to lean closer, trees bending in unnatural angles. Leaves rattled though no wind stirred. The ground beneath his boots felt soft, shifting, as if it were breathing. The toad blinked slowly. With each blink, its eyes flared brighter, golden fire spilling out across the pond. Jonah tried to step back, but his feet sank slightly into the soil, stuck as though the earth refused to release him. The voice came again. You carry a scent of choice. You do not yet know it. Jonah's heart pounded so hard he thought his ribs would snap. The air was sharp with the smell of wet moss, iron, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. He forced his voice through the tightening in his throat. What are you? The toad's throat bulged, shimmering as if stars pulsed beneath its skin. The surface of the pond rippled outward in slow circles, though nothing touched the water. I am older than this forest. Older than the stones under your feet. I was bound here, and now you stand where the circle thins. Jonah's ears rang with the sound, sharp and relentless, but the words sank deep into his mind. He could not look away. The toad's mouth opened again, impossibly wide, revealing that same swirling void. It was not empty. Shapes moved inside it. Elongated arms. Twisting faces. Mouths that whispered soundless words. Jonah staggered, nausea rising in his stomach. He tasted copper on his tongue. The ground pulsed beneath him like the beat of a giant heart. The voice thundered once more, each syllable pounding inside his chest. You will not leave untouched. Jonah's knees buckled. The earth gave way beneath him. Cold water surged around his legs, pulling him toward the pond though he had not moved. The lantern, now sunken beneath the surface, flickered with one last dying light. The toad leaned forward, eyes glowing so brightly they burned against Jonah's vision. The mist coiled tighter, pressing into his skin, sliding down his throat like smoke. Jonah gasped, choking, clawing at the air, but his lungs filled with that strange damp heaviness. The voice came again, closer, almost inside him now. "Breathe deep. See what others cannot." Jonah's vision blurred. The forest spun, and in the reflection of the pond, he saw not his own face, but something else staring back. Its eyes matched the golden glow. Its mouth stretched too wide, and its voice whispered in perfect unison with the toad. Jonah's heart lurched as he stared into the pond. The reflection did not mimic his movements. When he raised his trembling hand, the figure in the water kept its arms at its sides. Its head tilted slowly, with a sickening, deliberate grace. The golden eyes blazed brighter in the reflection than in the creature crouched on the bank. They pierced through the water's surface, reaching into him. Jonah tried to step back, but the earth clung tighter around his boots. The soil sucked at his feet with wet, greedy sounds. The reflection smiled. Its mouth stretched into that same impossible void. Inside, Jonah glimpsed swirling fragments of places he had never seen. A barren desert beneath a blood-red sky. A field of black grass, whispering without wind. A hallway of doors, endless, each one shuddering as if something inside longed to escape. Jonah's breath quickened, each inhale burning as though the air had turned to smoke. The toad croaked again, but the sound was different this time. It rolled through the ground, rattling his bones, forcing his knees to tremble. The reflection in the water stepped forward, though the real Jonah had not moved. Ripples spread outward, glowing faintly, as if the pond itself was a mirror of another world. Jonah's voice finally tore free, ragged and desperate. "Stay back." The reflection grinned wider, showing teeth that Jonah knew he did not have. Rows and rows of jagged shards, like broken glass. The toad's throat bulged, then deflated with a wet hiss. Its eyes never blinked. "You fear the mirror," the voice thundered inside Jonah's head. "But the mirror is only a door." The pond bubbled, thick and black now, as though tar rose from the depths. The reflection's hand pressed against the surface from inside. The water did not splash. It stretched, like a membrane, as the figure's hand pushed through. Cold droplets sprayed against Jonah's face, but they burned like acid. He staggered back, struggling, pulling with all his strength, but the earth held his feet like iron shackles. The hand from the reflection kept rising, pale and slimy, dripping water that hissed when it touched the ground. It reached for his chest. Jonah's lantern, drowned and broken beneath the surface, flickered once more. A faint glow lit the pond from below, casting grotesque shadows across the trees. The reflection stepped fully out of the water. It stood before him, wet, shimmering, breathing in perfect rhythm with his own lungs. Every inhale, every exhale, the same. Its golden eyes locked with his. Jonah felt something tugging at his chest. Not his clothing. Not his flesh. Something deeper. The reflection leaned close, mouth stretching wider, the void inside pulsing with light and shadow. Jonah's body shook violently as though his very soul was being pulled free. The toad croaked again, louder than thunder, shaking the forest to its roots. The trees bent low, their branches clawing at the earth. The mist closed in, choking, swallowing the path behind him. Jonah's scream tore through the night. But it was not his voice anymore. It was two voices. One human. One not. And the sound echoed endlessly through the forest. The scream echoed until the forest itself seemed to tremble. Birds burst from the treetops, scattering like shadows torn apart by fire. The pond's surface collapsed inward, spiraling, as if some vast mouth drank it whole. Jonah's body jerked forward, his chest stretching toward the reflection that now pressed against him. He tried to resist, but every muscle locked as if his bones were no longer his own. The reflection's fingers sank into him without breaking skin. It was not a touch, it was an invasion. Jonah gasped as something cold, slick, and writhing spread beneath his ribs. 1,000 whispers filled his ears at once. Some were angry. Some were pleading. Some were laughing. Each voice clawed against his mind, layering over each other until words lost all meaning. The golden glow flooded his vision. For a moment, He saw nothing but blinding light. Then, shadows swam through it. Figures, countless and endless, walking in circles across barren plains. Their bodies twisted, stretched, faces melted into masks of sorrow. The reflection's mouth pressed to his ear, though its body stood still before him. "You see the hunger. You see the waiting. Now you understand." Jonah's stomach turned as the vision shifted. He was standing at a long wooden table, candles burning low, their flames bending backward as if resisting the air. On the table lay a feast of flesh, uncooked, bleeding, and around the table sat toads, dozens of them, massive and still, their eyes glowing gold. One by one, they croaked in rhythm, each sound shaking Jonah's chest until he thought his heart might split apart. At the head of the table sat a figure cloaked in shadow, its outline shifting like smoke. It leaned forward, though its face remained hidden. "Do you accept the bond?" The voices thundered as one. Jonah shook his head violently, his throat raw, his voice barely scraping out. "No, never." The reflection seized his jaw, tilting his face upward. Its grip was ice, unyielding, forcing his eyes open to the vision before him. The cloaked figure raised one long hand. The feast on the table writhed, flesh twisting into shapes, faces, eyes, mouths calling Jonah's name. He gagged, bile rising, but his body would not let him turn away. The figure's hand came down like a gavel. The feast fell silent. Every toad at the table turned its glowing gaze upon Jonah. Their croaks rumbled in perfect unison. The reflection leaned closer, its wide mouth curling upward. "You already accepted when you looked into the water." The vision shattered. Jonah collapsed onto the forest floor, gasping, choking on mist. The pond was calm again. The trees still. But the toad remained. Its golden eyes pierced through the dark. And when Jonah lifted his head, his reflection no longer matched him. It stood above the pond, smiling, alive. And it whispered with his own voice, "Now I walk in your place." Jonah froze, his breath shallow, his body trembling against the damp soil. The reflection, his reflection, was no longer bound to the pond. It moved freely, standing tall with his same frame, his same face, but twisted with that terrible smile. Its golden eyes gleamed with an unnatural fire, brighter than the lantern ever had. Jonah tried to push himself up, but his arms felt heavy, sluggish, as though each bone had been filled with stone. The air clung to his skin, thick and clammy, carrying the faint taste of iron. The reflection crouched, lowering itself until its face hovered inches from Jonah's own. It whispered with Jonah's exact voice, perfect and mocking. "No one will know the difference." The words crawled into Jonah's ears, slick and cold, coiling around his thoughts like vines. He shook his head violently, desperate to break free. His throat burned as he forced sound through it. "You are not me." The reflection only laughed. The sound was wrong, Jonah's laugh, yes, but layered with something deeper, something hollow, like wind rushing through a crypt. It stood upright again, stretching its hands, admiring the flesh it now wore. Every movement was sharp, deliberate, as if savoring the novelty of control. Jonah clawed at the ground, dragging himself backward, dirt packing beneath his nails. The mist thickened, weaving shapes between the trees, faces he almost recognized, shifting and dissolving before he could be certain. The toad croaked once, and the sound rolled through the clearing like a drumbeat. The reflection glanced down at Jonah, tilting its head. "Do not waste your fear. You gave it freely the moment you lingered here. That is the trade." Jonah's chest constricted. He tried to speak, to beg, to fight, but his voice collapsed into broken gasps. The reflection turned toward the path, the very trail Jonah had walked only minutes before. Its steps were confident, sure. Each footfall sank into the soil, yet left no mark behind. Jonah's panic flared. He struggled against the earth that bound him, twisting, thrashing, desperate to break free. But the ground pulsed again, a slow and steady heartbeat beneath his body, keeping him pinned. The reflection paused at the edge of the mist and looked back once more. Its smile widened. "You will stay here. You will watch. You will learn the hunger as I walk in your world." Jonah screamed, his voice raw, shredding his throat, but the sound carried no weight against the forest. The reflection stepped into the shadows of the trees, and in moments it was gone. Only silence remained. The toad shifted slightly, its golden eyes burning brighter as it watched Jonah struggle. Then, with a wet croak that rattled his bones, it sank back into the pond, leaving the surface smooth and still. Jonah lay paralyzed, breath shallow, vision blurring. The mist closed in tighter, curling around his body, seeping into his mouth, his nose, filling his lungs. He gasped, choking, until every breath carried the damp weight of it. And then, he saw it. The pond's surface rippled once more, forming a perfect mirror. But the image staring back at him was not the reflection that had stolen his life. It was Jonah himself, trapped, pounding against the glassy surface from the inside, mouth open in a soundless scream. The realization sank into him like ice. He was no longer Jonah of the waking world. He was Jonah of the pond. And the forest had claimed him. Jonah pressed his palms against the pond's inner surface. It was smooth, cold, and unyielding, like glass forged from ice. He slammed his fists against it, each strike sending ripples through the water, but none of them broke free. The ripples only circled back, twisting around him, closing tighter until he felt the weight of the pond pressing on every bone. Outside, the forest looked distant, hazy, as though he peered through a sheet of smoke. He saw the trees. He saw the faint shimmer of moonlight above the mist. And then he saw himself, his reflection, walking the path he once claimed as his own. It moved easily, confidently, without the tremor of fear that now shook Jonah's body. It wore his face like a mask, but every so often, the golden glow of its eyes leaked through, pulsing like a heartbeat in the darkness. Jonah screamed again, though no sound escaped. Only bubbles poured from his mouth, rising slow, bursting on the surface above his prison. Each bubble carried fragments of his voice, fragments of words. But outside, nothing could be heard. The silence inside the pond was suffocating. Jonah spun, searching for a way out, but all around him was water without depth. No bottom. No top. No edges to grasp. Shapes moved in the distance, pale and drifting, like figures lost in a current. At first, Jonah thought they were fish. But as they drifted closer, he saw their faces. Human faces. Eyes wide. Mouths open in screams just like his own. Their bodies twisted and stretched, tangled with roots and shadows, as though they had been dissolved and remade. One of them floated close enough for Jonah to see clearly. It was a man, or what remained of one. Skin waxy. Lips gone. Teeth bared in a frozen scream. Yet his eyes still moved, darting back and forth, desperate, alive. Jonah recoiled, pressing himself against the invisible surface of the pond. But the figure only drifted closer, brushing against him with cold, slippery skin. A whisper slipped from its throat, faint and broken, as if carried by water. "Welcome." The sound burrowed into Jonah's ears, and then into his skull. More faces appeared. More bodies. Some old, bones wrapped in scraps of flesh. Some fresh, their eyes wild with terror. They circled Jonah slowly, surrounding him in a silent ring. Each one stared, mouths opening and closing like drowning things. But no air filled their lungs. No cries reached the surface. Jonah tried to push through them, tried to move, but the water thickened, heavy as stone. The figures pressed closer, touching him, pulling at him with fingers that felt more like roots than flesh. Their whispers swelled, growing louder, echoing all around him. Each voice spoke different words, yet together they became a single tide of sound. "You are one of us now." Jonah's vision blurred, his chest tightening as the weight of the pond crushed him further into its depths. He struggled, clawed at the invisible barrier, but his strength bled away with every passing moment. The reflection outside the pond paused on the path and turned its head. For a brief, terrible instant, its golden eyes met Jonah's from across the barrier. It smiled. And Jonah understood. The reflection knew he was watching. It wanted him to see everything. Every word it spoke in his stolen voice. Every smile it gave to those who once knew him. Every step it took deeper into the world that Jonah could no longer touch. Jonah's chest heaved with silent sobs. The faces around him closed in tighter, whispering, pulling, dragging him deeper into the endless pond. And the forest above stood quiet, waiting, while Jonah's reflection disappeared into the world beyond the trees. Jonah drifted in the depths of the pond, suspended among the others. Their whispers faded, until only silence remained. He no longer fought. The surface above shimmered faintly, and through it he saw pieces of a world that felt like memory. The reflection, his reflection, stood in the village square, laughing with familiar faces. It carried his voice, his smile, his gestures. No one questioned. No one saw the golden flicker in its eyes. Jonah pressed his palm against the inner surface of the pond one last time. The glassy barrier was cool beneath his touch, but now it no longer resisted. It held him gently, like the hand of something vast and patient. His heart slowed, the panic softening into a quiet ache. He realized the truth. The forest was older than him, older than anyone. It always needed another reflection, another voice, another face to walk in the world. And now, Jonah was part of its silence. The mist above the pond curled, then thinned, fading into the night sky. The water stilled, smooth as black glass. Only the moon remained, casting its silver light across the surface. From the edge of the forest, a single croak echoed, low, deep, and final. Then the pond was quiet. And the story of Jonah, the man who followed the lantern's path into the mist, ended where the forest had always intended.